I never thought I'd be questioning a 7-year relationship while battling cancer, but life has its own plans. My boyfriend Mike and I met at a local bookstore, both reaching for the same book. It was one of those moments that seem perfect in hindsight. Our hands touched, we laughed, and somehow ended up getting coffee together. Neither of us was looking for love at the time. We were both healing from failed marriages and careful about jumping into anything new. Mike was different from anyone I'd dated before. As an engineer, he loved spending time alone in his workshop, building things and solving problems. I worked in social services, always surrounded by people and their stories. Somehow, our differences worked. We enjoyed taking long drives together, listening to jazz, and just being quiet in each other's company. After 2 years of dating, he moved into my Victorian house, though we kept our finances separate and never talked about marriage. He always said love didn't need legal papers to be real, and I agreed. Life was comfortable, if not exactly romantic. The days passed peacefully. Mike wasn't one for big gestures or celebrations. Birthdays and anniversaries were usually marked with a simple dinner out. His gifts were practical rather than romantic, but I told myself it didn't matter. We had a good life together. Our routines were solid, and our conversations, though rarely emotional, were always respectful. Sometimes I wished for more warmth, more spontaneity, but I learned to appreciate the stability he brought to my life. Then came January, and everything changed. The doctor's words hit me like a physical blow: late-stage ovarian cancer. I remember driving home in a daze, finding Mike in the backyard working on one of his projects, a birdhouse this time. The normality of the scene felt almost cruel against the weight of my news. When I told him, he hugged me immediately and promised to stay by my side. For better or worse, he said, though we weren't married. Those words should have brought complete comfort, but something in me hesitated, sensing perhaps what was to come. The first signs appeared during my initial surgeries. Mike would drive me to the hospital and wait in the waiting room, but once we were home, he seemed lost. The medication schedule overwhelmed him. Different pills at different times, some with food, some without. Even with written instructions and alarms, he'd forget doses or mix them up. His frustration showed not in anger, but in withdrawal. He'd bring me water and disappear into his workshop or behind his computer screen. My friend Sarah became my lifeline during this time. She organized other friends to bring meals and help with housework. My sister Kate flew in several times from across the country, staying for weeks to help care for me. While I was grateful for their support, watching Mike retreat further into himself broke my heart a little more each day. The chemotherapy was brutal. Mike would drive me to some sessions, but during the actual treatments, it was my friends who sat with me, held my hand, and talked me through the worst moments. They seemed to know instinctively what I needed: when to talk, when to just be present, when to distract me with stories, and when to simply let me rest. Each day became a reminder of what was missing in my relationship. Mike was physically present but emotionally absent. I'd watch him work at his desk while I lay in bed, fighting nausea and exhaustion, wondering how two people could be so close, yet so far apart. The distance between us grew with each passing day, marked by moments of disconnection that became impossible to ignore. When my birthday came in April, just a few days after I'd managed to celebrate his with a homemade cake and his favorite takeout, he forgot it completely. No card, no acknowledgement, nothing. The hurt was sharp and immediate, but it was what happened next that really showed me who he was or wasn't in this relationship. I needed another major surgery, and Mike chose that exact time to schedule an elective knee procedure he'd been putting off for years. He claimed it couldn't wait any longer, but the timing felt like more than a coincidence. It felt like an escape. The week before my surgery, Mike took time off work, not to be with me, but to go camping and hiking. He said he needed to decompress before the challenging times ahead. I lay in bed those nights, alone with my fears about the upcoming surgery, while he was out in nature, finding his peace without me. On the day of my surgery, my family and friends filled the hospital waiting room. Mike was there too, but his mind seemed elsewhere, probably already thinking about his own upcoming procedure. He gave me a quick kiss before they wheeled me into the operating room, but even that felt distant, like he was already gone. The surgery was successful, but recovery hit me hard. By the time I came home, Mike had already had his knee surgery. Picture this: 2 patients in one house, both needing care, but only one of us had chosen their timing. My sister helped me settle in while Mike hobbled around on crutches, each of us stuck in our own bubbles of pain and discomfort. The absurdity of our situation hit me one afternoon when Mike called from the bedroom, asking if I could bring him some water. I was lying on the couch, barely able to move after my cancer surgery, and he wanted me to take care of him. That moment crystallized everything wrong with our relationship. A call from Mike's aunt helped me understand some things better. She told me about Mike's mom dying from brain cancer when he was a teenager. He watched her go through years of treatments that didn't work in the end, she explained. I think he's dealing with some PTSD from that time. Her words helped explain his behavior, but didn't make it hurt any less. My friends kept showing up for me. Sarah would sit with me during the long afternoons, telling me stories about her kids to distract me from the pain. Kate would fly in whenever she could, taking over the household and making sure I was eating properly. Even my coworkers arranged a schedule to check on me regularly. Through all of this, Mike remained in his own world. He focused on his knee recovery, seeming almost relieved to have his own medical issue to deal with, instead of facing mine. When we were both home, the silence between us grew heavier each day. We became like 2 planets, orbiting the same space, but never really connecting. I spent a lot of time thinking during those weeks of recovery. Late at night, when pain kept me awake, I'd look at Mike sleeping peacefully and wonder how we'd gotten here. We'd built a life together over 7 years, but when things got really tough, he couldn't, or wouldn't, step up. Sarah noticed it too. During one of her visits, while she was helping me change my bandages, something Mike had never offered to do, she gently said, "You know, it's okay to want more than this. Being present isn't enough if they're not really there for you." Kate was more direct. During one of our late-night phone calls, when I was feeling particularly lonely despite Mike being in the next room, she said, "Sis, you're fighting cancer. If he can't show up for you now, when will he ever?" Her words hit home hard. One evening, about 6 weeks after my surgery, I found myself watching Mike as he worked on his laptop. He seemed so comfortable, so unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I realized then that I'd been holding on to who I wanted him to be, rather than seeing who he really was. The man I loved existed somewhere between memory and hope, but not in my reality. That night, I decided it was time for an honest conversation. We were both recovering, both a bit stronger, and I couldn't carry the weight of unspoken words anymore. "Mike," I said, sitting down next to him, "we need to talk about us, about everything that's happened since my diagnosis." He looked up from his laptop, surprised. Maybe he thought we were fine, or maybe he'd been avoiding this conversation as much as I had been. "I've been here," he said defensively. "I didn't leave." "Being here isn't enough," I replied, feeling oddly calm. "I've been fighting cancer, and yes, you've been physically present, but I've felt completely alone through all of it." We talked for hours that night. He opened up about his mom's death, about how watching her battle cancer had broken something in him. He admitted that seeing me sick brought back all those memories, and he just couldn't handle it. I understood his pain, I really did, but understanding didn't change my needs or make his absence hurt any less. "I need more than what you can give," I finally said, "and that's not your fault, but it's not mine either." The hardest part wasn't making the decision to end our relationship. It was accepting that sometimes love isn't enough. You can care deeply about someone and still not be right for each other. You can share 7 years of memories and still need to walk away. Mike moved out gradually over the next few weeks. My friends and family surrounded me with even more support during this time, proving again that I was anything but alone. Sarah brought her kids over to make me laugh with their silly stories. Kate extended her stay, helping me rearrange the house to make it feel like my own space again. Looking back now, I realized that my cancer diagnosis didn't break my relationship. It revealed what was already broken. Mike's promise to stay with me had been genuine, but promises aren't enough when the fundamental ability to support each other isn't there. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and someone else is to let go. My recovery continued, both from cancer and from the end of my relationship. Each day brought new challenges, but also new discoveries about my own strength. I learned that it's okay to need support, to ask for help, and to expect more from the people who claim to love you. I learned that being alone is better than being lonely in a relationship. Sarah visits almost daily now, and we often sit in my garden talking about everything and nothing. Kate calls every evening, her voice a constant reminder that distance doesn't matter when love is real. My other friends drop by regularly, filling my house with laughter and life. They show me what true support looks like, not just in the big moments, but in all the small ones too. Yesterday, I sat in my oncologist's office for a follow-up appointment. My prognosis is good, and as I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. My house feels different now, lighter somehow. The empty spaces that Mike left behind have been filled with something more valuable, self-love and the knowledge that I deserve someone who can truly be there for me, in sickness and in health. I don't regret my years with Mike. They taught me important lessons about love, about what I need in a partner, and most importantly, about my own worth. Cancer changed my life in many ways, but maybe the most significant change was showing me that true support isn't just about staying. It's about how you stay, how you show up, and how you love when things get hard. As I write this, sitting in my favorite chair by the window, I'm reminded that endings are also beginnings. My battle with cancer isn't over yet, but I'm stronger now, surrounded by people who know how to love without retreating, how to support without being asked, and how to be present in all the ways that truly matter. Life rarely goes as planned, but sometimes its unexpected turns lead us exactly where we need to be. I'm learning to embrace that truth, one day at a time.